Well, who remembers last October when the Mega Millions jackpot got up to $1.5 billion? People went crazy. They were buying tickets. There were lines in some places for people to buy tickets. And they were dreaming about what they would do, what their life would look like, how they would spend it. It was crazy. Why? Because people were convinced that $1.5 billion would make their life better. And listen to me. If somebody wants to give me $1.5 billion, I will find out I'll let you know if it makes life better. But the reason everyone went like that is because the belief is money makes life better, and lots of money makes life even better. But here is a truth that we have to be willing to own, because it is truth, and that is this: having lots of money does not make life better. We think it does, and I know some of you are thinking right now, yeah, give me a lot of money and I will decide if it makes life better. That's what we think, but there's a reason that there are stories after story after story of people's lives that are train wrecks after having won lots of money. Stories and stories and stories of people who reached financial success in whatever endeavor they were in, whose lives ended up falling apart. Because money does not necessarily make your life better, and lots of money does not necessarily make life better. As a matter of fact, here's the truth, that many poor people live rich lives, and many rich people live poor lives. I know a lot of people who don't have a lot, and their lives are rich and full. And I know a lot of people whose bank accounts, I would like just a percentage of. And their lives are horrible. They're broken relationships, bondages and addictions, and you name it. Their lives aren't rich, their lives are poor. So we've been in this series called Better, How to Live a Life by God's Design. And the overarching idea that we've learned throughout this series is this: that life gets better when life gets simple. Life gets better when life gets simple. And so we've been looking at different ways in which we can make our lives better by simplifying. Last week, if you were with us, you know we talked all about people, our relationships with people, because people are probably the single biggest cause of complexity in our lives. People bring demands, expectations, disappointments, hurts, needs. If we could just get rid of the people stuff, our lives would be simpler, therefore our lives would be better, but we can't. And so if you haven't been with us, if you've missed parts of this series, I encourage you to go back and listen. You can go online, you can listen to it, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the videos, or go to our website, hickoryridgecc.org. You can listen or watch the messages, because while this morning we're going to talk all about possessions, if you don't understand the previous things, your life actually won't get better. See, if you get your finances simplified, but your relationships are still complex, if you're living at a pace that's unsustainable, if the important things aren't coming first in your life, then all you've done is cleaned up your budget, and your life can still be a train wreck. But if you get all these other things right, and then you fix your finances, well, it's like the icing on the cake. So this isn't first, this is last. This isn't the foundation. This isn't where you start. This is the last part. And when you get this right and the other things right, life will be better. So this morning we're going to talk all about possessions. Aren't you glad you're here? So let me just say on the front end, yes, while we're talking about possessions, which means we're going to talk about the M word, money, just relax. We are going to touch on giving, but this isn't a message on giving. This is a message on how to live a better life when it comes to your finances. It's really about, how do I make my life better when it comes to my finances? And how do you do that? This is the key. Your life gets better with your finances when you move from consuming more and having less to consuming less and having more. If you can do that when it comes to your possessions, your money, your goods, and your material things, if you can move from consuming more and having less, which is how most of us live, to consuming less and having more, I promise you, your life will get better. Who at the end of the month wouldn't like to have more left over? Who at the end of the month wouldn't like to have more to help other people, to do more things, to go more places? If you begin to consume less and have more, your life will get better. So how do we do that? There's 4 biblical keys. There's 4 things that God teaches us in His Word that will help you make that shift from consuming more and having less to consuming less and having more. So here's the first thing you need to do. It begins by trusting. Trusting God, not money. Our money, our currency in the United States, printed on it says, in God we trust. Most of us live as if in money we trust. We can say in God we trust, but most of us trust in money. Here's what Paul, writing to Timothy, had to say. He said, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God. If you want to move from consuming more and having less to consuming less and having more, it's where do you place your trust? See, when you trust in something, you depend on it. You depend on it for security. You depend on it for a sense of it's going to provide for you. It's going to provide for your family. It's going to build my sense of self-worth, my self-esteem. Look how big my bank account is. Look at my portfolio. When we place our trust in those things, then we're relying on those things. And that's what our culture tells us. That's what society tells us over and over from every advertisement you see, whether it's billboard, radio, television, YouTube ads, Facebook ads, everything tells you, trust in your possessions. If you have the right investments, you'll be set. If you have that new car, you'll be a winner. If you have that big house, you can finally have contentment. Everything in our culture screams at us that our stuff, our possessions, are what we should place our trust in. So we end up living for stuff. I know people that live for money. They'll make decisions on who they marry based on money, and then they end up getting divorced based on money. They won't take certain jobs simply based on the pay because, well, that job would be fulfilling, it would bring a sense of satisfaction, but I can't afford to live there. They decide what neighborhood, what community they live in because of how it reflects on them, who they are. Everything that they do, the way they live, they actually will turn away from the call of God on their life because of money. Well, God's calling me to this, but I don't know if I can afford to do that. So therefore, I won't make that move. And so really, they're living for money and not for God. It's why Jesus said you can't serve God and money. You can't live for God and live for money. You have to pick one. And so that's how so many of us live, that we trust in our possessions. So there was this guy, and Jesus tells a story about him. There's this guy, and he is living for money. He's living for his possessions. He is gaining more and more and saying, look at all that I've got. So Jesus is telling this story, and this guy is growing in his possessions. And here's what he says. Jesus is talking, and he says, then the man said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. All that I've built up, that's where I'll store it. I will build up all my possessions and I'll store it there. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? You've stored it all up. You've made life all about possessions. You've got a lot of stuff. But at the end of your life, what's your stuff worth? Somebody else is going to get it. Then Jesus says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, who places their trust, their confidence, their security in possessions, but is not rich toward God. You have to ask yourself, at the end of your life, when you take your last breath, and no one knows when that moment's going to be. For some of you, it will be here way sooner than you ever thought. And for others of you, you're going to live to a ripe old age. You can name whatever age that is. But for all of us, at some point, we'll take our last breath. And at that point, that moment before you take your last breath, what will your cars have been worth? What will your homes have been worth? What will all of the clothes and the TVs and the gizmos and the gadgets, what will all of that been worth? Nothing. It will be worth less than nothing. Nobody will care. What did your life do? Who did your life impact? That's what's going to matter. So if you make possessions everything, you will waste everything accumulating possessions. That's what Jesus is getting at. If you make possessions everything, how much can I accumulate? You will waste everything. You'll waste your life accumulating possessions. That's why at the end Jesus said, that's how it will be for anyone who stores up treasure for themselves, but isn't rich toward God. It's not that stuff is bad. It's, are you trusting in your stuff? So it starts by trusting, and then it picks up on what Jesus just taught. And the next thing that you need to do is this. It's about giving. It's about giving, and this is where we get all upset. We don't like giving. We don't like when the church talks about giving and pastors talk about giving. But please hear me. The reason this is so important is what Jesus just mentioned. It's that trust and giving are interconnected. They're interlaced. In other words, they're opposite sides of the same coin. You can say, I trust God, but if you don't give, you don't trust God. I'm just telling you that right now. If you refuse to give, you don't trust God. It's about lordship. Who's the Lord of your life? Do I trust God or do I trust money? So here's the truth. Giving tests whether you trust God or money. It's a test. Every time you give, it's a test. Do I trust God or do I trust money? Will I give or will I hold on to it? Do I believe that a big bank account is more secure than trusting God with my resources and giving the way He asks me to give? Here's how the book of Proverbs puts it. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. When you trust God by giving, you will find that God moves in your life in amazing ways. It's a principle that is taught throughout the Scriptures, from the stories of individuals, whether it's Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Jesus, whether it's the ideas that are taught throughout the Scripture, but in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, from Abraham to Jesus, from Moses to Paul, it's taught over and over again. And here it is, that if you will trust God, you will find God trustworthy. If you will trust God, if you will give, you will find God trustworthy. He'll fill your vats to overflowing. That does not, please hear me, it does not mean you're going to win the $1.5 billion mega millions. It doesn't mean you're going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise and never have times where you're saying, I feel like my finances are tight right now. It means that even when your finances are tight, you'll see God move in miraculous ways, that He will provide for you in supernatural ways. That, as we learned in the series on Philippians, my God shall supply all my needs according to His riches in Christ Jesus. So we have to learn it's about trusting God, and we trust by giving. Giving is always a test of our trust. Now, there are three basic ways that the Bible teaches giving. Here they are. The first one is this, the tithe. The tithe. Tithe literally means 10%. So the first 10% of what comes to you, you give back to God. Whether it's what you earn through a salary, whether it's through an inheritance, whether it's through a windfall, whether it's through a gift, you give 10% back to God. And you give it through the local church. You can't tithe anywhere else except the local church that you're a part of. You say, I'm not part of a local church. That's the first problem. Become part of a local church. Well, I'm still looking. Well, I left the church. I moved to an area. I'm not connected somewhere yet. Well, then save that 10%. And when you get committed and plugged into a local church, give that. But it's 10% before anything else. That's the tithe. Then there's this, offerings. Offerings. Offerings are anything you give over and above 10%. So, biblically, God asks us to give 10%. It's the minimum that God asks. But there are people who, out of love, appreciation, commitment, joy, say, I don't want to just do the minimal. I want to do over and above that. And so when you give offerings in and through the local church, that's an offering. When you give over 10% through the local church, that's an offering. Offerings, tithes and offerings go through the local church that you're a part of. They don't go to civic organizations. They don't go to disaster relief. They don't go to a need that you know of in the community. Tithes and offerings go through the local church. You can't give tithes and offerings anywhere else. If you do, It's what the writer in Malachi says. You've robbed God with your tithes and offerings. It doesn't mean you're not generous. It doesn't mean you're not giving other places. You may be giving generously, huge checks other places. But if you're not giving your tithe, 10% in and through the local church, you're robbing God. That's what the book of Malachi says. So tithes, offerings, and then this, gifts. Gifts. Gifts are what you give anywhere else. Gifts are what you give after you say, I've committed to tithe, 10%, I'm giving an offering. See, here at Hickory Ridge, we have offerings that we receive, special offerings from time to time, Christmas offering, those type things. But after that, there's gifts. You want to help someone, you want to help a family member, you want to help a neighbor. You hear about the disaster in the Bahamas, and you want to give to that. Those things are wonderful. And you should give to those things. You should care about people that are struggling, the poor and those in need and those that are in debt and those that are laboring and struggling in some way financially and with material things. Their house burns down, so you buy them stuff. That's wonderful. Those are gifts. After your tithe, after your offerings, come gifts. Here's how the book of Proverbs puts it. It is a sin to despise one's neighbor, but blessed is the one who is kind to the needy. You have to help others. Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker. If you are not willing to give gifts to help those that are in need, you're actually showing contempt for God. But whoever is kind to the needy honors God. They honor God. One point in the book of Proverbs, it says, when you give to the poor, it's like lending to God. And if you lend to God, He'll repay you. Don't worry. He's good for it. So we need to help those that are in need, our neighbors, our friends. Here's how it puts it later in the book of Proverbs. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will reward them for what they have done. So that is what we need to do. We need to give our tithes. After you give your tithes and your offerings, you can and should give gifts to those in your life. You should be sensitive. You should be aware. You should know the needs of those in the lives of those around you, and you should give to them. So how do you do that? How do you give these ways? Well, you tithe through the local church. You can give on Sunday morning. You can give online. We talk about that every week. Offerings. I mentioned we receive a special Christmas offering every year. It's the one special offering that we typically receive here at Hickory Ridge. And this year I'm so excited. I'm so excited when I look back historically, the generosity of the people here, how every year the amount that's come in for the Christmas offering has gone up by huge amounts. And I'm believing that we'll see the same thing this year, and I'm excited about where it's going to go. I'm not going to tell you right now, but later on in the year, as we get closer to Christmas, it's going to really help a lot of people. And so I'm excited about that. But there's other opportunities to give offerings. We've got a team going to Thailand, a short-term missions team. They're going to Thailand in February of 2020. You can support any of those people individually or just as a group. You can go online to do that. You just pick the person or that you want to support or just the general Thailand team. And those are offerings that you give over and above your tithe. But then there's the gifts. And your gifts, see, as a church, you all give your tithes. You give your offerings. And then we give gifts, and we help people. As a church, we help people with medical bills. We help people when they need counseling. We help people with financial issues that are going on. So your tithes and offerings end up going through the local church and being gifts to help people. But you can and should, over and above your commitment to tithes and offerings, give. You should give gifts. You should help those in need. Because here's what the whole passage is getting at in Proverbs, that if you will care for others, God will care for you. If you will care for others, if you will say, great, I can give tithes, I can give offerings, but I will be moved with a heart of care and compassion and concern for those who are struggling. And if you will care for others, God will care for you. Again, it's about trust. So if you want to move from consuming more to having less, to consuming less and having more, you have to start, it starts by trusting. Then it moves to giving. Now here's the third one, and it's a bad word. Budgeting. I know people say, I can't afford to have a budget. I just want to say you can't afford not to. If you, praise God. If you say I can't afford to have a budget, it means you can't afford not to. And if you say I have so much money I don't need a budget, well, give some of your money away and then you'll need a budget. No, budget. We all need to have a budget. It makes life gets better when life gets simple. When you have a budget, I know everyone thinks budget makes life complex. Budget doesn't make life complex. Budget makes life easy. The reason so many of us don't budget, and what I want to talk about for a few minutes before we get into budgeting, is the reason that most of us don't budget is this word, debt. Oh, debt. Don't you just love debt? Don't you love paying somebody to borrow their money? And you pay a lot to people to borrow their money. And the Bible has a lot to say about debt. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but we've looked a lot at the book of Proverbs, and we'll continue to, because the book of Proverbs is called the book of wisdom, and it has a lot to say about finances. And here's one thing it has to say when it comes to debt. Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. Yeah. You want to be a slave? Get in debt. You want to owe somebody and then basically give away your freedom? Get in debt. Here's what it says also in the book of Proverbs. Don't agree to guarantee another person's debt or put up security for someone else. If you can't pay it, even your bed will be snatched from under you. The whole idea that the Bible teaches is to, for the most part, the principle, not an ironclad law, but the principle is to avoid debt. Avoid debt and don't co-sign loans. Because here is what debt is. We just don't talk about it like this. Debt is a type of bondage. Debt owns you. Remember we read, the borrower is servant to the lender. Debt owns you. Every time you increase debt, you give away a little bit of your freedom and your life. Think about it. Think about it this way. We have we've talked about this in this series. We have a limited number of days on earth. Here's what we do. We trade our time to earn money. So we're trading our life for dollars. But the dollars we have aren't enough. So we borrow from future time to have more dollars now. So that we can buy stuff that we can't afford. So now we're trading our life for stuff that we don't even want. 5 years from now, you say, I don't want that TV. I want the bigger TV. 10 years from now, you say, I don't want this house. I want the bigger house. 5 years from now, you say, I don't want this car. I want that car. But you're still paying for the future that you needed then. So you're trading your time for stuff. And you say, well, okay, I understand that. And then the book of Proverbs says, don't do that, because if you do, what if you can't make the debt payments back? What if you can't repay it and you're in bondage and that's not fun? But you say, I can manage my debt. I can handle it. I can make the minimum payments. I don't get into trouble. I pay it all back. Great. So let's talk about that. So let's say you have a credit card. Now, I'm going to be very generous. Let's say you have one credit card, and all you have on that credit card is a $3,000 balance. Every other bill you pay cash on the barrelhead, you don't overextend yourself, but you have this $3,000 balance, and you can't pay it off. And so you make the minimum monthly payment. And let's say your interest rate is 16%. Let's look at what that would look like. So you have a $3,000 balance, an interest payment of 16%. You make the minimum payment every month. You're never late, 2% every month. It will take you 24 years and 2 months to pay that debt off. You are borrowing from your future. For 24 years and 2 months, you're in debt. You are owned. You're in bondage to that $3,000. More than that, you will have paid in interest $4,994. You'll pay more in interest than the money was worth. And your total payment will be $7,994. If you think borrowing $3,000 and paying back almost $8,000 is a good investment, I've got a bridge to sell you. So, this is being generous. At the end of 2018, let's get home with this. At the end of 2018, there was a study. They conduct a study every year, and what it finds is what's the average credit card debt of each state. So here it is for the state of Delaware. The average debt at the end of 2018, credit card debt, $7,158. You say, that's not bad. Just remember, you say, no, I don't have any. That means somebody has doubled. Somebody's got yours. $7,158. 16% rate, 2% minimum, you'll be paying that for 40 years. 40 years, you'll have paid in interest $13,645, and you'll have paid back a total of $20,803. That's just credit card debt. We're not talking about student loans, debt that you have to the furniture store and the appliance store. We're not talking about payday loans. We're not talking about auto loans. We're not talking about mortgages. This is just credit card debt. This is consumer debt. So is all debt bad? Is all debt evil? Should all debt be avoided at all costs? No, the Bible doesn't teach that. There are some times where debt is not negative, but it's rare. It may be to gain an appreciable asset, building, land, a house. It may be that there's times you're starting a business and you have a sound, well thought out business plan, but you need startup capital in order to get this business going, and so you take a business loan. There are times for that, and those things can be done, but they should be done judiciously, not often, and with a lot of wisdom and thought ahead of time. But the principle is, as much as you can, avoid debt, because most of the debt that we wrestle with in this country is not appreciable debt, and it's not business loans. It's consumer debt. It's to fund a lifestyle we can't afford. It's to buy things that we want. It's to appear to be something that we're not. It's to have the luxuries and the lifestyle and say, we've got all this stuff, and look at me, and wow, this is great. And we are swimming in debt. We can't afford to pay it off. And when you can't afford to pay off your debt, does it make life simple, or does it make life complex? It makes life complex. If you want a better life, you need to learn how to manage debt. Get out of debt and avoid debt if at all possible. Otherwise, you'll be like my friend Stanley Johnson. And I want to introduce you real quick to Stanley.
I'm Stanley Johnson. I've got a great family. I've got a 4-bedroom house in a great community. Like my car? It's new. I even belong to the local golf club. How do I do it? I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I can barely pay my finance charges. Somebody help me.
Somebody help me. The Bible says that the Bible offers help. The Bible offers a clear path. Avoid debt, get out of debt, stay out of debt. Life will be better. Life will be simple. So the reason a lot of us don't do the thing called budgeting is because we look at our debt and we just feel overwhelmed by it, and so we say, I can't even afford to start a budget. But when you budget, and in order to get out of debt and stay out of debt, here's what you need to do when it comes to a budget. You need to control your spending by sticking to a budget. You need to create a budget, stick to it. Part of that budget is paying off your existing debt, and then once you're out of the existing debt, you stick to your budget so you avoid future debt. So, I'm not going to get into how to budget. I'm going to get into some principles about budgeting. The first one is this: live on less than you make. I know that's a shock. If you want to live within a budget and have a simple life, a better life, and avoid debt, live on less than you make. Here's what the writer of Proverbs says: the wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. Learn to spend less than you make. Dave Ramsey would say, have more money at the end of the month than month. Have some money left over. The next thing is this: you need to track every dollar. You need to be a faithful manager of what God's placed in your hands. If you were a money manager for somebody else, and that person came to you, they would have the right to say, tell me where all my money went. Give me an accounting of where all my money went. If we do indeed, and we should see God as the owner of everything in our lives, then we ought to be able to tell God, this is where every one of the dollars that you placed in my hand went. And most of us can't. Well, it went somewhere. I don't know. I stopped somewhere and bought something sometime between now and then, and it's gone. Maybe it fell out of my pocket. I don't know. So Jesus is talking, and he makes this statement, and the whole idea isn't just finances, but it's got a financial implication. And here's what he says. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you haven't been faithful in accounting for the dollars that have been placed in your hands, why would I give you something even greater, richer? You say, God, I want you to move in my life. Track every dollar. Be faithful with what I've already given you. Then I'll give you more. And the last is this. Pay off your debt. Pay off your debt. Pay off your debt. I know people that have large amounts of debt. Yet, rather than paying off their debt, they travel. They go places. They do things. They go out, spend more. Well, the people, it might not be a credit card. It may be a personal loan from a friend, from a family member. They understand. Listen to me. They don't. They'd like their money back. You promised. You said, I'll pay you back. But shouldn't I be able to enjoy you? No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't be able to enjoy their money. You should pay back their money. Then you can enjoy your money. But you shouldn't live a life enjoying their money when you owe them money. Pay them back. Pay back your debt. Here's what Paul writes to the Romans. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. Pay it back, pay it back, pay it back. The last thing is this. So if you want to move from consuming more to having less, to consuming less and having more, it starts by trusting, then giving, by budgeting. And the last thing is this, by saving. You have to learn to save. See, saving provides for you and for others. Saving provides for you and for others. Saving provides for you and for others. So let's just say, for example, all of a sudden tomorrow, your income was cut in half. You're a two-family income, two earners in your family, and one of you loses your job or decides to stop working, has to stop working, and your income is cut in half, or your boss calls you in and says times are tight, and we got to trim payroll, and so your income is cut in half. How long could you make it? A week, a month, 2 months? Saving provides for you and the unexpected things that you know will eventually happen. You just don't know when to expect them. Braces, a new car, a new roof, repair the furnace, the refrigerator blows up, those kind of things. So saving provides for you and it provides a blessing to others. In Proverbs it says this, a good person leaves an inheritance to their children's children. When you learn to save, it provides for you, and it's a blessing to others, your children, your grandchildren, the generations to come. So you have to learn to trust, you have to learn to give, you have to learn to budget, you have to learn to save. And there is this idea in saving, because sometimes we think, well, saving is way down the road. I mean, do I need to save now? Yes, you do. The writer of Proverbs puts it like this. Whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. There's a concept that financial managers teach. It's called the power or the miracle of compound interest. It's found in the Bible. Basically, it's when you save a little bit, starting way back then, and just save it little by little. Way back then, when you get way up here, that little bit you saved will be worth a whole lot more. But the longer you wait to start saving, the less time you have. And the less time you have, the less it will grow. The miracle, the secret of compound interest is time. The earlier you start saving, the greater that savings will be. Even though you don't save proportionally to how big it gets, because it grows exponentially. Now, I know what you're saying. You lost me there sometime when you said exponentially. So let me just show you what it looks like. Here you go. If at age 20 you start saving $200 a month, and it earns 8% annually, it might fluctuate, but on average it earns 8% annually. You start that when you're 20 years old, $200 a month. By the time you're age 70, you could pick any age. I picked 70. When you hit age 70, you will have accumulated $1,377,000, having only saved $120,000. You saved $120,000 for those 50 years. It's worth $1.3 million. If you wait 10 years, I can't afford it at 20, I'll start when I'm 30. Well, it costs you $700,000. I don't know if you can afford that. If you can, write me a check. At age 30, you start saving the same $200 a month, the same 8% annually. You'll have saved $96,000, but it will be worth $612,000. Now that's nice, but it's less than half of what you would have gotten starting at 20. And if you wait till you're 40, you'll have saved a total of $72,000. The value of that investment, $271,000, almost $272,000. Do you see how time is the key contributing factor to saving? The earlier you start, the better. Now, I know what some of you are saying. I'm not 20. I'm not 30. I'm not 40. I'm 40 is so far back in the rearview mirror, I don't know if I can see it. Should I start saving now? Yes, because saving provides for you and is a blessing to others. One day, you can leave it to someone else. You can leave an inheritance. You can leave a blessing to someone else. It may not get to be worth $1.3 million. It may not get to be $600,000, $200,000. It might only be worth $70,000. But you bless somebody with $70,000, it will change their life. So don't say, I'm too old to start saving. Are you breathing? You're not too old to start saving. Save. Saving provides for you and is a blessing to others. Saving for the future means saving now. You can't say, in the future, I'll start saving for the future. Some of you did that, and you're at a point where you go, I can't get to the 1.3 million, and you wish you could go back to 20. Start saving now. If you start saving now, it will be a provision for you and a blessing to others. So, here's what I want you to know. I covered a lot of ground when it comes to finances, and I feel like I only scratched the surface. It's only the tip of the iceberg. So, as Isaac mentioned earlier, our Connect group signups have started, and I'm really excited. One of the groups that we're offering this year is Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, FPU. And it will take these things that we touched on here this morning, and it will dive deep into them. It's a 3-month commitment, 2-month commitment, October and November. So it's about 8 weeks, 9 weeks. And it will go into these things, budgeting, saving, paying off debt, how to get to a point where you are consuming less and you have more. So if that's a group you'd like to be a part of, normally, most groups we say sign up for one group. Don't sign up for multiple groups. Here's the exception. You want to sign up for Financial Peace University. It meets on Tuesday nights every week for 9 weeks. Great. Do that. And you could still sign up for another group if you want. But if you say, I can't commit to 2 groups, I can only pick one, then I'm as your pastor, if you need to sign up for Financial Peace University. I want to see people walk in a better life. And part of it happens when you start consuming less and having more. So, there you go. Keys to a better life. 5 weeks, 5 different ideas. And again, the overarching idea is this. Life gets better when life gets simple. Life gets better when life gets simple. And one way we make life better, one way we make life simple is this. We change our pace by practicing the Sabbath. Change your pace by practicing the Sabbath. Here's the next one. Make the important a priority by finding balance. Make sure the important things get taken care of. Then this. Choose where your time goes based on God's plan for your life now. What's God's plan for your life now in this time, in this season of life? Make sure that you choose to invest your time there. And then last week we talked about this. Spend time now with those you will wish you had spent more time with later. Spend time now with those you will wish you had spent more time with later. If you want your life to get better, spend it with the people that you're going to wish you had. And then, of course, what we talked about this week. If you want your life to get better, consume less and have more. If you do those 5 things, I promise you, your life will get better. Doing those things isn't easy. Doing those things is not simple. It takes commitment, it takes dedication, it takes intentionality, and it takes time. But if you'll do those things, you will find that you have a better life. Would you stand with me this morning?